This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
The Presidency has announced that Brazil's state-owned oil and gas producer Petrobras is set to return to Nigeria. The expected return of Petrobras follows a state visit by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to Brazil. Petrobras pulled out of Nigeria in 2020 as part of an African divestment strategy due to the company's rising debt. For more on this, we're joined by Ayodele Oni, an oil and gas expert. Mr. Oni, good morning. Thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
What was your reaction to this news about the expected return of Petrobras?
Yeah, I mean, generally good news. The more international investment you have, the better the strength of the currency, job opportunities, and generally play a role, even if very minimal, in the overall health of the economy. So it was good. I also suggest to me that the oil and gas reforms may be working.
I guess maybe the question then would be whether it is counter to the sentiments that popped up when Petrobras first pulled out. Because when it first pulled out, there was excitement. Local investors said it made room for them. So with it coming back now, how does this balance out?
I guess one first needs to ask why they left in the first place. I think there were issues around first. I think they had problems at home. First, they were going through some corruption allegations even back in Brazil generally. And then they complained about a few things in Nigeria. It was difficult. They had operational challenges, navigating Nigeria. They didn't quite understand navigating Nigeria. They had concerns around even security, even the market conditions, and the fact that oil prices were really low and they were fluctuating a lot at some point, and they just generally were doing a portfolio optimization and improvement in their capital allocation. And they thought it was just better to move closer to Brazil, and then they left all of Nigeria. I think they are even already they're already back in Africa. They just haven't come back to Nigeria yet. I think they participated in a particular bid recently. I just can't remember what country it is. I don't know if it's Sao Tome.
Yes, as I understand it, they're looking at Sao Tome and Principe. There's also possibilities of returns to Ivory Coast and Togo as well. So a general return to Africa, it seems.
Correct. Yes, correct. So, but to answer, to finally even answer that last bit of your question, I think there's big enough space and the resources are enormous. If we are around 8-9 for gas, around 13 for food, it then suggests that we have enormous resources, huge reserves for everyone, both domestic, both local and indigenous and international play. And everybody has value they add, right? In terms of technology, the international guys usually have it. That's why you find out that all of our deep offshore blocks, Akpo, Ejina, Agbami, that's OML, what is BOML 127? I'm not sure they've converted to a PML, and OML 130 respectively. Akpo and Ejina do like 330,000 barrels per day, whilst Agbami does around 250 or so barrels per day. So that together is giving you almost 600,000 barrels per day. So there are huge assets. Of course, they only own a small part, 8%, and I think in the case of Agbami, and about 16% in the case of Ejina and Akpo. And, they were under a production sharing contract or arrangement, as it were. So I think that there's enough space for everyone to play.
From part of what I've seen, there isn't that much detailing out there on the specifics of their return. And even at that, right, I think it's worth noting that the announcement doesn't necessarily say 100% they are returning. It says that the president has received a commitment from the Brazilian president. So we didn't sign any papers. Anything could happen. But from what I understand, they are looking to return to or to get access to deep offshore acreage. Can you speak to how this is different, whether or not it's different from their initial operations in the country, and what it really means across the sector, the sort of benefits we get as a nation as well?
Okay, I don't think that there's much difference because they were deep offshore before. If you look at Akpo, Ejine, and Agbami, where they had interest, they're all deep offshore blocks. None of them, they are those blocks that were given to indigenous companies at that time, and they all did not have the technical capacity on the financials, and they sold 40%. They had the right to sell, I think, up to 40% to international companies, and Chevron, Total, and Co. bought. And those guys were the ones that invested under production sharing arrangements with the private companies. They were the ones that invested. But of course, people like Mr. Alakija are benefiting from it now, or FAMPA and the rest. You know, those are the guys, Nigerians giving deep offshore blocks. So they bought from those deep offshore blocks. So that's where they are going back to. And recall, even Shell sold, sold its subsidiary that holds land and onshore assets generally, moving deep offshore only. Because of those security concerns, they've still not been able to completely deal with security concerns, infrastructure damage, particularly over land. But if they are deep offshore, then you'll be dealing with FPSOs and FSOs, and you can have large sea-going vessels to come and pick your food, and they are straight in the international waters. Instead of first navigating local onshore land issues, damage to pipelines and all of that, going deep offshore saves you all those challenges. And remember, I don't think in any of those cases actually they are an operator. I think in all of those cases they are not operator. So it's just other issues other than direct operational issues. I think understanding Nigeria, navigating the issues in the oil and gas industry in quotes, I think those were some of the issues. And they just generally thought to optimize portfolio. I think that they had better assets outside of Nigeria in terms of the cost and all of that, cost of doing business at that time. So what could have changed with the presidential directives and others will be the cost of doing business. Operations should be easier and faster. Now contracting cycle, the government has made policies to contract that and to generally reduce corruption. I'm sure they wouldn't want to directly say that corruption, particularly maybe with government officials in the past, may also have been a reason. But with government policies and directives, I think that that should have reduced. I mean, you can't completely eliminate corruption anywhere in the world anyway. So yeah, those are my own views. I think some of those things, the dynamics have changed a bit, and on that basis, they are reconsidering coming back to Nigeria.
Mr. Oni, before we leave this conversation, I was recently reminded that Nigeria is actually a gas country that produces oil. Now, in the case of Petrobras, their 2024 to 2028 strategic plan indicates that it will be investing around $102 billion in things like potential acquisitions, low carbon initiatives, everything from biorefinery to wind and solar power. My question here is, does it look like at the moment Nigeria will be turning more towards other, endeavors in the oil and gas sector that have a better relationship with the environment, or simply focusing on what is a popular product, oil itself, in this new relationship with Petrobras?
Okay, it may well be like you've stated earlier, or your colleague has stated, there isn't so much information on the exact issues or the exactness or precision around these specific issues. But yes, you're right, Nigeria is a gas province with some oil in it. And you see that there's a lot of gas initiatives being pushed by the government, including, I just had a conversation with a client trying to get money from the gas infrastructure fund, right? Midstream and downstream infrastructure fund. So there's a lot of push. Recall that this decade is a decade of gas in Nigeria, and gas is more thermal efficient, it's cleaner for the environment. So because of these issues, government is pushing more with the gas narrative. You see, they're talking about CNG buses, and even if you go elsewhere abroad, you see a number of public transport You see a combination of CNG buses and maybe electric, but more CNG. What I have seen, because I was in Europe last week, and particularly in a place like Paris, I did see a lot of CNG buses, right? So I think that we're copying what the world will do. And like they've been saying, gas is the bus stop before you completely decarbonize. So I think that it may well be within their immediate policy to invest in gas and other renewables. You are aware Shell bought Daystar, for example, a few years ago, and because Daystar is a power company doing solar, clean energy, right? So I think that that's where the world is gravitating to. And I'm sure you'd also have noticed that there are more Tesla cars, and whilst I don't intend to advertise, maybe I don't say electric vehicles, generally speaking, in the country, right? So I think that everyone is gradually transitioning, but I think that's going to play a critical role for another half a decade at least. And Nigeria is not being left behind, particularly in the gas conversation. And a number of homes are moving to solar. I'm sure you see a lot of solar panels. So yeah, I won't be surprised if those are their areas of investment, generally speaking.
Mr. Oni, thank you very much for your time and expertise on this conversation. Ayodele Oni is an oil and gas expert who joined us this morning on Now Breakfast to speak on the expected announced return of Petrobras to Nigeria. This return is coming on the heels of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's visit to Brazil that has seen a tightening of relations between both countries. You're still listening to Radio Now 95.3 FM Lagos, you're beyond the news station. We urge you to stay tuned. In a few short moments, the spotlight, the focus turns to a business, a brand, and the entrepreneur behind it here on Brands Now.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.